Have you ever heard your own name whispered in the dead of night, when you were certain no one else was there? Imagine traveling to a quiet seaside town, hoping to escape the chaos of life only to discover that something ancient, something restless, is already waiting for you in the fog. Tonight, we enter Whitby, England, and the haunted ruins of its abbey, a story of whispers, chains, and a voice that will never let you go. If you love chilling ghost stories and want more tales that will keep you awake at night, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss the next haunting story. Your support keeps the darkness alive here. The wind swept harshly along the north seacoast as Evelyn Carter stepped off the bus and onto the cobbled streets of Whitby. The town looked as though it had been carved out of the mist itself. Rows of old houses leaned into one another, their chimneys coughing out threads of smoke that disappeared almost instantly in the fog. Far above, on the cliffs, the skeletal ruins of Whitby Abbey stood like a dark crown against the grey sky. Evelyn shivered, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. She had chosen this place for a reason. At 29, Evelyn was exhausted by the constant hum of New York City. The subway's metallic screech, the endless crowds, the weight of deadlines and expectations had left her brittle. When she had read about Whitby Abbey, the inspiration for Dracula, something in her stirred. It sounded like the kind of place where silence still ruled, where the air itself might cleanse her of the noise she carried within. The inn she had booked was small, a weather-beaten building clinging to the edge of the coast. Its wooden sign creaked back and forth, the words almost worn away by salt and time. Inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke and seaweed. The innkeeper, a kindly woman in her 60s with grey hair tied in a bun, gave her a key with a brass number tag. Evelyn carried her suitcase up a narrow staircase, the carpet soft but frayed under her feet. Her room overlooked the sea. The window was streaked with salt, and through it she could just make out the outline of the cliffs. The cries of gulls cut through the air as the tide churned against the rocks below. Evelyn sat on the bed and closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She told herself this was what she needed: distance, solitude, the sea. But as night fell, a strange unease settled over her. The inn grew quiet, the laughter of patrons in the downstairs bar dwindling to silence. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the gaps in the window frame. Sleep would not come. She turned, shifted, pulled, the blankets tighter, but the unease only grew. It felt as if the silence itself was pressing against her chest. Then, close to midnight, she heard it. 3 knocks, firm, deliberate, right at her door. Her breath caught. She sat up, listening. The corridor outside was dark, lit only by a single dim lantern at the far end. For a moment, she thought perhaps she had imagined it, but the knocks had been real. She was sure of it. Gathering her courage, Evelyn swung her legs out of bed, the floorboards creaking softly beneath her feet. She walked to the door, heart hammering, and opened it. No one was there. The corridor stretched empty in both directions, the faded wallpaper curling at the edges, shadows deepening with every step the lantern's light could not reach. She leaned out, scanning left and right, but the silence was complete. And then, from the far end of the hallway, a voice. It was a woman's voice, soft and deliberate, drifting through the air as though carried by the mist itself. It spoke a single word: Evelyn. Her blood ran cold. No one here should know her name. She had signed into the inn under her full name, but the innkeeper downstairs had not called her by it. No one else had spoken to her, and yet, in the darkness, that voice had called to her as if it had always known her. She stared down the corridor, but there was nothing. Only the dim glow of the lantern and the oppressive silence waiting to swallow her whole. Slowly, Evelyn shut the door, her hand trembling against the wood. She backed away, her breath shallow. The inn seemed to sigh around her, the walls groaning as though the old building itself had shifted in its sleep. She climbed back into bed, pulling the blankets up to her chin, but she could not close her eyes. The voice echoed in her skull, long after the sound had faded. Evelyn, the following day, passed under a pale, uncertain sun. Whitby seemed deceptively normal in the daylight. Fishermen mending their nets near the harbour, tourists buying postcards and sticks of rock candy, seagulls squabbling over scraps near the pier. Evelyn tried to convince herself that what she had heard in the inn was nothing more than exhaustion playing tricks on her. She walked along the narrow streets, admiring the old stone cottages with their red-tiled roofs, the shops selling jet jewelry, the smell of fish and salt water drifting on the breeze. Yet even under the daylight, her eyes kept straying to the cliff where the abbey loomed. Against the sky, its ruined arches and broken towers looked less like relics of the past and more like warning fingers clawing at heaven. By evening, the weather shifted. Heavy clouds rolled in from the sea, blotting out the stars. A sharp wind rattled the windows of the inn. Evelyn sat on her bed with a book in her lap, but her eyes scanned the same line over and over without comprehension. She couldn't shake the memory of the voice that had called her name. As midnight drew near, she stood by the window. Mist clung to the glass, and beyond it lay only shifting white fog. Then, faintly, the voice returned. Evelyn, she froze. The sound was different this time, thicker, as if it rose from beneath the waves. It came from outside, not from the corridor. She pressed her face closer to the window, straining to hear. Evelyn, come closer. The syllables dragged, soaked in sorrow, as though a drowning woman cried out from the deep. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She pushed the window open a crack, the cold night air rushing in. The voice grew clearer, sweeping across the mist. On the cliffs opposite, just beyond the outline of the abbey, she saw it. A figure. It stood at the edge of the precipice, shrouded in a white garment that fluttered in the wind. Though the fog blurred its features, Evelyn could see the way the figure raised one arm, slowly, deliberately, and beckoned her closer. Her stomach lurched. She whispered to herself, "No, no, this isn't real." The figure swayed as if in grief, then, with sudden violence, pitched forward into the void. Evelyn gasped. Her hands gripped the window frame so tightly, her knuckles whitened. She expected to hear the scream of someone falling, the sickening crash of a body meeting the sea. Instead, there was nothing, no sound at all. The mist below remained unbroken, as if the figure had been swallowed whole before it ever touched the water. A cry tore itself from her throat. She stumbled back, slamming the window shut, her chest heaving. Moments later, there was a pounding at her door. She flinched, too terrified to answer. But this time, it wasn't the phantom knocking. A fisherman staying in the room across the hall had rushed over at her scream. Others soon followed, their faces weathered and solemn. Evelyn tried to explain what she had seen, the figure on the cliff, the fall, the voice. But the fisherman only shook his head slowly, his expression grave. "You're not the first," he muttered. Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" He glanced toward the Abbey's silhouette lost in the mist, then back to her. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Others have heard it too. The calling from the Abbey. Some say it's a woman's voice. Others hear it different. But they all say the same thing. If you hear it once, you mustn't listen again. Evelyn swallowed hard, the chill creeping deeper into her bones. What happens if you do? She asked. The fisherman's gaze darkened. They vanish. No body, no trace. Just gone, like the sea claimed them. The room grew so silent that the only sound was the restless crash of waves against the rocks below. Evelyn felt her blood turn to ice. She had come to Whitby seeking peace, a reprieve from her old life. But now, standing in this fog-shrouded inn, she realized she had stumbled into something older and far more dangerous than anything she had ever known. And the voice was not finished with her yet. The next morning dawned grey and restless. Waves pounded against the rocks as if the sea itself were warning the town of something it could not contain. Evelyn rose late, her sleep fractured by dreams of the voice. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard it slow, dragging, insistent, whispering her name from the depths of the fog. She needed answers. The innkeeper suggested she try the tavern on Church Street, a place where the locals often gathered. A place where, perhaps, old stories lingered more openly than the polite smiles she'd encountered so far. The pub was dim and heavy with the smell of wood smoke and ale. Nets, rusted anchors, and faded photographs of fishing crews hung on the walls. The few patrons inside turned briefly to look at her, then went back to their drinks. Evelyn made her way to the counter. The man behind it was tall and broad-shouldered, his hair and beard white as salt, his face lined like weathered stone. His dark eyes seemed to hold something more than age, something watchful, as if he measured everyone who entered. "You're not from here," he said, his voice low and steady. "No," Evelyn admitted, sitting carefully on a stool. "I'm visiting." "My name is Evelyn Carter," he interrupted, his expression tightening. Her heart skipped. How do you know my name?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he poured a dark ale into a glass and set it before her, though she hadn't ordered anything. Then he leaned forward. "Because she knows it. And if she's spoken it, you're already in danger." Evelyn froze, staring at him. "My name's Arthur Blackwood," the man continued. "This tavern's been in my family for 3 generations. I've heard the stories since I was a boy, stories that are older than the town itself, and I've seen what happens to those who don't heed them." She swallowed. "Who is she?" Arthur's eyes flicked toward the window, where the Abbey loomed through the fog. His voice dropped to a hush, as though even inside the tavern, the walls might be listening. "They say she was a nun, Sister Isolde, 15th century. Back then, Whitby Abbey was stricter than iron. Isolde broke her vows. She fell in love with a foreigner man the abbots called a heretic. They called it sin, betrayal. For that, they chained her beneath the stones. Some say she died praying. Others say she cursed the Abbey with her last breath." Evelyn listened, transfixed. Arthur's jaw tightened, but death didn't silence her. Her voice still lingers. She calls to those who can hear her, those sensitive enough to feel the pull. Over the years, travelers have vanished. A girl from Leeds, to students from Germany, even a fisherman's wife. All claimed to hear the voice. And then one night, they simply disappeared. A shiver crawled up Evelyn's spine. "I saw her," Evelyn whispered. "On the cliffs last night. She waved to me, then she jumped." Arthur's face darkened. Further, That's how it begins. She shows herself to the chosen, calls them by name, and once you've answered, he shook his head slowly. There's no saving you. Evelyn's hands trembled around the untouched glass, but there has to be a way. If she's trapped, maybe she wants help. Maybe Arthur slammed his palm against the counter, the sound sharp enough to silence the room. The few patrons looked up uneasily, then turned back to their drinks. Arthur leaned in close, his eyes hard. Listen to me. She is no helpless soul. She is hunger. She feeds on those who follow. You must leave this town before she fixes her eyes on you completely. Pack your things tonight. Catch the first train tomorrow. Do not go near that abbey again. The weight of his words pressed down on her chest. Evelyn nodded, but her mind swirled with doubt. The voice she had heard had not sounded vengeful. It had sounded broken, pleading, as if suffocating beneath centuries of sorrow. Still, Arthur's warning clung to her like the damp sea air. If she stayed, she risked being swallowed by the Abbey's curse. If she left, perhaps the voice would fade, and she could return to the life she had come here to escape. But as Evelyn stepped back into the fog-soaked streets, she knew one thing for certain. The Abbey was watching, and the voice was not done with her. Evelyn told herself she should leave. Arthur's warning replayed in her mind all afternoon as the fog drifted inland and the waves slammed endlessly against the cliffs. Yet something gnawed at her, a compulsion she couldn't explain. The voice hadn't felt like a threat. It had felt desperate, like someone clawing for breath in deep water. And Evelyn had always been the kind of person who needed answers, who couldn't walk away from unfinished stories by late afternoon. She found herself wandering through a narrow side street, her gaze caught by a dusty bookshop squeezed between two stone buildings. The window was crowded with second-hand volumes, their spines warped and faded. A sign on the glass read, "Curios and Antiquarian Books." Inside. The shop smelled of mildew and old paper. Stacks of books leaned precariously against one another, forming crooked aisles. The shopkeeper, a gaunt man with spectacles perched on the tip of his nose, barely looked up from his ledger when she entered. Evelyn ran her fingers along the spines until something stopped her. It was a slim, leather-bound journal, its cover stained with water damage, its pages yellowed and brittle. She opened it carefully. The writing inside was in Latin, but interspersed were fragments of English translations written in the margins. The handwriting was rough, hurried, as if someone had tried to decode the words in secrecy. Her pulse quickened as she read, "They chained me below. I begged for forgiveness, but none came. The stones are cold, and the iron bites. They call me fallen, but it is their cruelty that damns them. I will not be silent. Not until someone hears me. Not until someone sets me free." At the bottom of the page, the name was scrawled in a shaky hand. Isolde. Evelyn clutched the book, her throat dry. Without hesitation, she purchased it and hurried back to the inn. Night descended quickly. The storm outside built with each passing hour, rain lashing against the windows, wind shrieking down the chimney. Evelyn sat on her bed, the journal open in her lap. Candlelight flickered against the walls as she traced the words, reading every translated line she could. Isolde's entries grew darker as the pages went on. She described iron chains cutting into her skin, the smell of damp stone, the chants of monks echoing above while she rotted below. She swore vengeance. She promised her voice would never fade. She begged for freedom, for anyone to listen. A sudden chill swept the room, so sharp Evelyn gasped aloud. The candle flames guttered. The air thickened, damp and cold, as though the sea itself had seeped into the walls. Her breath misted in front of her face. She turned toward the mirror on the far side of the room. The glass was fogging over, though no steam filled the air. A thin layer of condensation spread across its surface until she could no longer see her reflection. Then, slowly, letters began to form, traced by an unseen hand. "Help me." Evelyn's scream tore through the inn. She stumbled backward, the journal slipping from her hands, its pages fanning out across the floor. The words on the mirror quivered, the condensation dripping down like tears. And then, just as suddenly, the letters vanished. The mirror cleared. Only Evelyn's own pale, wide-eyed reflection stared back at her. The room was warm again, the candlelight steady. The journal lay open and still on the floor, as though nothing had happened at all. She pressed her hands to her face, shaking. Her heart thundered so loudly she thought it might burst. Was Isolde reaching out to her through the pages, through the walls of this very room? Or had Evelyn's exhaustion finally broken her mind? Downstairs, laughter and voices drifted faintly. From the tavern, ordinary, human sounds. But up here, in her room, Evelyn knew she was no longer alone, and the Abbey's curse had begun to seep into her bones. The storm carried into the next night, though Evelyn barely noticed. All she could think about was the journal. The words burned behind her eyes. "I will not be silent. Not until someone sets me free." Arthur's warning echoed too, but it was drowned beneath the pull of the voice. Each hour she resisted only deepened her sense that something was waiting for her, calling to her, demanding her presence. By the time the town's lamps flickered out and Whitby surrendered to the night, she had made her choice. She packed a flashlight, her phone, and a small digital recorder she'd brought from New York. With the journal in her bag, she left the inn. The streets were deserted, swallowed by mist. The tide crashed angrily below as she climbed the long stone steps, leading toward the Abbey ruins. The closer she drew, the thicker the fog became. The silhouette of the Abbey rose from it like the ribs of some ancient beast. Arches stood jagged against the sky, walls half collapsed, their edges clawed by centuries of wind. The place was both ruin and monument, a cathedral of shadows. Evelyn switched on her flashlight. Its beam cut through the mist in a trembling cone. Her recorder blinked red as it captured the sound of the wind. For a moment, there was only the whistle of air through hollow stones. Then a voice bled into the static. "Set me free, Evelyn." Her stomach lurched. She raised the recorder, pressing it close to her ear, as if it might help her believe. What she'd heard, the voice was faint, almost drowned in static, but it was there. "Set me free." Evelyn swung the flashlight toward the center of the Abbey. There, against one of the broken columns, stood the figure. White robes clung to her like seaweed, heavy and dripping though no rain fell. Chains hung from her wrists, their links clattering against the stone. Her face was a ruin, skin torn, eyes hollow sockets that drank in the light but gave nothing back. Her mouth moved slowly, whispering words Evelyn could not hear. Evelyn's breath caught. "Isolde," she whispered before she could stop herself. The figure lifted its head, and though its eyes were nothing but black pits, Evelyn felt them pierce straight through her. She stumbled backward, the beam of her flashlight. Jittering, the figure began to move. Not with the stumble of a corpse, but with dreadful grace, as though gliding across the stones, the chains dragging behind like the toll of a funeral bell. Evelyn turned and bolted toward the Abbey's entrance. The mist thickened, swirling around, her legs tugging her backward. Her flashlight flickered. She reached the great wooden doors, shoved at them with both hands. They groaned, resisting. For one awful second, she thought they would not move at all. Then, with a deafening crash, they slammed shut in her face. Evelyn cried out, pounding her fists against the wood. The sound echoed back at her, swallowed by the Abbey's vast emptiness. She turned, chest heaving. The figure was closer now, only a few feet away, its mouth stretched wide. From that mouth came no words this time, only a low, guttural wail that rolled through the stones, shaking them like thunder. The Abbey had become a prison, and Evelyn realized with horror she was locked inside. The wail rattled the Abbey stones until dust drifted from the ruined arches. Evelyn staggered backward, her flashlight beam dancing erratically across the ancient walls. The doors behind her refused to budge, no matter how hard she shoved. The Abbey had closed itself around her like a trap. Panic clawed at her throat. She swung the light across the nave, searching for an exit. That was when she noticed a crack in the floor near the eastern wall, half hidden by rubble. The mist seemed to pool there unnaturally, as if the earth itself exhaled. Driven by terror, Evelyn scrambled toward it. Her fingers pried at the stones, until one shifted with a grinding sound. Beneath was a dark opening, a stairway spiraling down into the belly of the Abbey. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but the voice so close now, almost brushing her ear, pushed her forward. Evelyn. The sound was not in front of her. It was inside her. With trembling hands, she aimed her flashlight down the steps and descended. The air grew damp and suffocating, reeking of mildew and centuries-old rot. Water dripped steadily, each drop echoing like a heartbeat. The passage narrowed until she had to turn sideways to continue. Her bag scraped against the stone. The farther she went, the louder the sounds became. Not just one voice, but many. Whispers crowding in, overlapping, pleading, crying, screaming. "Help us. Free me. Don't leave." Her ears rang with them. She clamped her palms to her head, but it did nothing. The voices were inside the stone, inside the air, inside her, at the bottom of the stairway. She stumbled into a chamber no larger than her hotel room. Her flashlight beam wavered across the floor and froze. There, chained to the wall, lay a skeleton. Rusted iron cuffs still gripped its wrists and ankles. A rotted rope hung loosely round its throat. Its bones were blackened by moisture. Its ribcage collapsed inward. But around its neck, still gleaming through the centuries, hung a silver pendant engraved with a single name. Isolde. Evelyn's breath caught. She crouched, reaching trembling fingers toward the pendant. The moment her skin brushed the cold silver, the chamber erupted with sound. Screams, dozens, hundreds, rising at once. The agony of centuries pressed into her skull until her vision blurred. She fell to her knees, clutching the pendant. Unable to release it, the air shivered. When she looked up, the figure was there. No longer distant, no longer veiled in mist. Isolde's apparition filled the chamber, her once pale face now twisted with rage. The chains that had bound her in death rattled violently, though they were not connected to anything. Her hollow eyes flared with a depthless black. This was not a soul pleading for release. This was something else entirely. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, her words scraping through the stone. "You will take my place." Evelyn stumbled back, slamming against the wall. The apparition surged forward, the mist around it thickening, swirling like a vortex. Evelyn could feel the pull, not on her body, but on her very self, as if the spirit meant to tear its way inside her. Her flashlight sputtered, casting frantic shadows across the chained bones on the floor. The chamber groaned, the walls vibrating, with the voices of the dead. Evelyn screamed, clenching the pendant in her fist. But the sound of her own terror was drowned by the chorus around her. The tomb had become alive, and Evelyn realized too late that by touching the pendant, she had given Isolde exactly what she needed. The chamber shook violently, dust cascading from the ceiling, stones shifting beneath Evelyn's feet. She clutched the pendant tighter, but its silver glow dimmed as though it no longer resisted. The voices around her rose in a terrible chorus, screams and sobs blending into a single deafening howl. Isolde loomed taller now, her body stretched beyond human form, robes whipping in a wind that did not exist. Her face was a grotesque mask-half woman, half corpse, her mouth torn into an unnatural grin that split her jaw nearly to her ears. "You freed me," she hissed, her voice slithering through Evelyn's mind. "And now you belong to me." Evelyn staggered backward. The skeletal remains at her feet rattled violently, bones snapping as if stirred by invisible hands. From every crevice of the chamber, shadowed figures began to crawl, their outlines vague but their suffering palpable faces twisted in agony, mouths locked in eternal screams. These were not allies. They were the ones consumed before her, bound. To the abbey by Isolde's hunger, the ground split, a jagged crack tearing across the stone. From it, a rush of icy air surged upward, pulling Arthur Blackwood into the chamber. He had followed, lantern in hand, determination etched into his weathered face. "Get away from her," he bellowed. But before Evelyn could call his name, the shadows swarmed. They clung to him, pulling him toward the fissure. Arthur fought, swinging the lantern wildly, but the shadows dragged him down with terrible strength. His roar of defiance became a scream that dwindled into silence as the abyss swallowed him whole. "Arthur," Evelyn cried, her voice breaking. The chamber convulsed again. Rocks splintered from the ceiling, smashing onto the floor. The bones of Sister Isolde's corpse scattered as though blown apart by unseen force. Evelyn turned, desperate to run, but the passage she had entered was gone sealed by collapsing stone. The apparition closed in, chains coiled from her wrists like living serpents, snapping against the walls. Her hollow eyes locked onto Evelyn's. And in that instant, Evelyn felt her strength drain away. It was as though the black pits drew the very breath from her lungs. She screamed, but the sound never left her throat. The mist surged forward, wrapping around her body, seeping into her mouth, her nose, her eyes. The cold invaded her chest, crushing her heart in an iron grip. "You are mine," the voice whispered, echoing not in the chamber but inside her very skull. Evelyn's body convulsed. Her scream was swallowed by the mist. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Isolde's mouth stretching wider, devouring every sound, every flicker of light, until only silence remained. A month later, Whitby welcomed a new wave of tourists. The storm had passed, the skies were brighter, though the abbey still loomed on its cliff like a wound that refused to close. In the tavern, locals muttered about the American woman who had gone missing. Some said she had wandered too close to the cliffs. Others whispered that she had been claimed by the same curse that haunted the town for centuries. At the inn, the room she had once occupied remained empty. Guests avoided it, though none could say why. But at night, when the mist rolled thick from the sea and the abbey stood shrouded in pale moonlight, some swore they heard it. From the window facing the ruins, a woman's voice carried through the fog, soft, beckoning, impossible to ignore. "Come to me, Evelyn." and those who listened long enough realized the voice was not Isolde's anymore. It was Evelyn's, forever bound to the Abbey, forever part of the calling. And so Evelyn Carter was never seen again. Some say she vanished into the cliffs. Others believe her soul was bound to the Abbey forever. But if you ever visit Whitby on a misty night, you might hear it for yourself, the whisper of a woman calling from the ruins. And this time, it won't be Sister Isolde's voice. It will be Evelyn's, forever trapped in the darkness. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Like this video to support more terrifying tales, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss the next haunting story. Your support keeps the horror alive.
Thank you for following.